The Communist Party doesn't have a whole lot of financial and political clout.
Did you rent a convertible and drive Dealey Plaza with them in it?
That's a good idea. We didn't do that yet. It's a hoax, Kent.
Yeah, I think they pay like $25 a day while they're in session. Welcome to Bourbon and Rum, the podcast dedicated to civil conversation. I'm Kent, I like rum, and I'm from the left side of the aisle.
And I'm Kyle. I like bourbon. I tend to be a little more conservative. We're brothers talking politics over bourbon and rum.
What are you drinking?
I am drinking a 100 proof pecan wood finished bourbon from Land Run Distillery in Oklahoma. How about you?
Well, that sounds tasty.
It's okay. I'm not the biggest fan of Texas and Oklahoma bourbons because, and I was reading about this, the higher heat in the aging process tends to manipulate the flavor in a very different profile. There's some like bitter elements. I can't explain it technically, but there is a characteristic. If you drink any of the Texas or Oklahoma bourbons, they kind of have a similar aftertaste and flavor. And what I'm told is that's because it's sucking this flavor out of the barrel much faster because it's so hot versus up in Kentucky, it's a little bit cooler.
Of course, if they wouldn't age it in mesquite, maybe it would taste
Yeah, there
better.
you go. Well, it wouldn't be bourbon. It has to be oak, white oak.
I have a Bolivar 8-year. That's a Venezuelan rum.
Nice.
I don't know what they did to it. It is so sugary sweet. It's
Oof.
just loaded with sugar. And so much so that not today, but when I've had it before, you can add a little bit of lemon or lime juice to it without any syrup and get kind of a decent, like a rum sour flavor out of it. So
It's coming from Venezuela. Just be glad it doesn't have any fentanyl in it, Kent.
it may have interesting things dissolved. Who knows? Well, topic, we've talked amongst ourselves about really how much the world has changed and where party allegiances and alignments have changed. But I think you raised a really interesting question. What's that like? How does that play out across generations? For all intents and purposes, you've still got a few of the silent generation around, but in general, your oldest tranche of voters are your baby boomers, then Gen Xers, then millennials, and then we've got plenty of Gen Z voters. And how are political alignments and political discussion in general, how's that playing out in different generation groups?
Yeah, and it played out for us a little bit, for me a little bit this weekend because we had our mom who pretty much has always supported Republicans. That's what her parents always did. And even though the Republican Party has changed significantly, I think she's pretty loyal to the party and whoever they're putting up. Also had our late father's sister, and our aunt she's kind of one of the folks, well, she's always voted Democrat because her father always voted Democrat. But I also see in her a little different in that she's a little bit of an anti-establishment. I think no matter who's in charge, she has complaints with, but typically more the complaints on the Republican side just because that's what she grew up with. But what I think is fascinating about both of them is they both have allegiance to the party today that is probably 180 degrees from the party that they had allegiance to 50 years ago. But they're both pretty staunch defenders of that party. I guess where I'm going is I think in some generations, I would think in the youngest generations, they don't care what party they're in. It's all about who they are, what they're bringing to the table. It seems like the older you get, it's more about what party that links to impressions and views of each party that they've had over the years, which may or may not really be reflective of who's in power.
I think spot on. I think the change rate in parties is not a is neither static nor random. In other words, that it's not just like some things are under kind of constant evolution and you get accustomed to that change. We're coming off of a period where party alliances, traditional constituencies, we talked a little bit about this last week, that the relationship of labor unions to Democrat Party and candidates, right? Like those were pretty established ground for at least 50 years up until the last 12 years or so. So it's not like it's changing all the time. So people our mother's age have lived through a period where it was pretty consistent, but the last decade or so has been just free fall of evolution and change within these two parties.
Well, and my our aunt, on the other hand, I remember as a kid, she would, Reagan was in power, and she would always, kind of make fun of him and like, oh, this guy, and she's always struck me as somebody that whoever the Republican is in charge is kind of like the establishment that she needs to rebel against, and that being the Democrat is kind of being the rebel in the family, and partly because her brothers were both very staunchly Republican, and so just voting for the Democrat was rebellion enough. And then it's like whoever it is, well, they're a clown, or there's always those monikers that she has. But I also think that if she was more based on the views and really dug into it, if you stacked up Donald Trump versus Ronald Reagan, it's a very different, very different approach.
Yeah, completely. I think that I think you're right that it's kind of age related, and I think that it's the further expression of trends that have been at work in our country for longer than the 12 years that I mentioned, for at least 20 years. When did that book come out? I probably mentioned this on here before. Bowling Alone. Are you familiar with that book?
I've heard of it.
Robert Putnam. Bowling Alone, the subtitle is The Collapse and Revival of American Community. And it talks about a long trend of disengaging from community stuff. And it used to be that if you wanted to go bowling in this country, like you had to belong to a league, because the bowling alleys were, like Tuesday night is this league and Wednesday night is this league. And you couldn't just show up at a bowling alley and rent a lane and bowl. And now that's all people do, right? Like you might sit around with friends and be like, hey, let's go bowling. And you might do it as a one-off. But how many people that you know are in a league?
Well, I was laughing about the other thing we were talking about with our mom and aunt this weekend. I don't know, we got on the subject. Well, it's kind of related, I think, to the extent that, and I didn't needle them on it, but if you did want to give them a hard time and you dug into the issues, both of them are probably supporting crap today in the current administration or opposing something in the current administration that 50 years ago they'd either be opposing or for. And I said it was kind of like, my contention, we got talking about vaccines, and my contention is that if Trump had won instead of Biden, all the anti-vaxxers would be on the left, because then it'd be Trump pushing the vaccine, and they'd all be, oh, well, it's horrible. It's Trump saying to do it. Don't do it. But because Biden was saying to do it, all the Democrats for it and Republicans, it's like these predictable patterns. And we got to talking about RFK Jr., and like when he was a Democrat, I mean, everybody was for his crazy ideas, but now he's a Republican. Well, he's an idiot, and
Kennedy is an enigma to me. I read before the election, I read and saw him on some things, and he gave the vibe to me at that time of like, yeah, he's crazy, but kind of interesting crazy, and brings up some points. Like, I think the general anti-vax thing is just nuts. I mean, I really do. But he had some other angles that I thought were like, oh, well, that would be interesting to think through. But Yeah, I don't see that working out very well for anybody.
Well, I think a lot of his stuff, he's brought up some stuff that people don't think about, like that whole thing with the dyes, the food dyes. That was
Mhm.
really interesting to me. Is like every other country, I'm probably screwing this up, but like the Doritos, like what kind of potential harm are we willing to endure to make sure our Doritos look the right color, or Fruit Loops or whatever?
I do think that generational question is interesting. I think how people look at things is different. I see a lot more general cynicism among younger people. I saw just in some commentary yesterday, or over the last few days in the aftermath of the election, that the Democrats did arguably pretty well in. The conversation was about double haters and how this is really hard for the pollsters. There's all kinds of people that are like, yeah, I hate both parties. I can't stand either of them. But I might vote, and I might vote in a kind of a capricious way. And I mean, that makes it really hard for the pollsters to keep track. It makes hard for the campaigns to know where to spend money. And again, we all know this, but it was interesting to hear somebody kind of say it out loud. Like, there's almost nobody in elections that gets like hardcore Republicans or Democrats that get changed to the other side. It simply doesn't happen. And in fact, there really aren't that many people in the middle. The whole game is who shows up at the polls and doesn't. Like, it's not about changing people's minds. It's about whose people are voting.
Yeah. Well, and although I say like this is a quality of the older generation that they've stuck with their party. I mean, I've always voted Republican. You've been voting Democrat for what, since Obama?
Yeah, 20 years.
And you could probably make the case just within those 20 years, the party demographic and message has shifted considerably.
Yeah, I
So
think so.
we're in the same, I guess my point is we're kind of in the same boat as the older generation to a degree. Neither one of us
Yeah, but
are like recent bandwagon jumpers either way.
no, that's true. But I don't think I would. Maybe I'm kidding myself. I don't think I would hold out that long if the party got too far afield of where I think they ought to be. I think that the success of Mamdani uh, is a little worrisome. I don't want people. Now that said, I mean, I was ready to pull the lever for Bernie Sanders. So certainly a more liberal approach to the party. I don't think though that for me it's not even about the definition of the conservative or liberal. You've said this before. It it's been useful for me to hear you say this, and it understands the degree to which Trump at least portrays himself as plain spoken and not of the swamp, and that how powerful that was for people. I think that's a part of what the power of Bernie Sanders is. Now, again, he's been in Washington for a long time, but he definitely has the
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
outsider approach.
Well, I like, like I said, I listened to more Bernie Sanders than I ever had in my life. I listened to that Rogan interview, but I mean, yeah, he seemed pretty genuine. And even somebody calls him on his thing, he's not, he's introspective enough to consider an opposing viewpoint. And to me, that's a big test. Like,
Mm-hmm.
If you can see why somebody would argue with you and why there's an alternative, I think that's I think that's important. But I mean,
No,
I don't know. I don't know if we're that much different than our older generation to that regard.
yeah,
Well, and I don't mean to keep talking, but you were kind of like our aunt. I mean, you're kind of in especially while Dad was still alive and hardcore Republican. You kind of went down the rebellion path of I'm going to vote for a Democrat. I'm not saying that's the only reason you did it. I think you were much more thoughtful. But when you come from a largely Republican family and you're the lone wolf Democrat, you are, there is and I think, I don't put words in your mouth, but when you turned, or, that sounds negative. When you changed your
I
mind,
was
um,
co-opted by the enemy.
when you changed though, it was a degree to rebel against the status quo and the crap that you experienced there in Utah, right? I mean,
Yeah, I can't say that wasn't part of it, but I would say that kind of more than that changed my mind. That put me in a position where I was thinking critically about maybe that's a maybe I'm stretching that, but do you see the difference between those two? It's not like it changed my mind, but it called into question the orthodoxy of Republican thinking that I'd been pretty embedded in. I was like, wait a
yeah.
minute. And again, right or wrong, I maintain that my schism with the Republicans was over the Iraq War. And I thought that George Bush and Dick Cheney and company were way too ready to go to war for something that didn't really stand to scrutiny in the end. And you know, interestingly, I would say of all the things that I like, that was enough to push me out of the party. But now looking back on that, uh, it's hard for me to say that I wouldn't have taken a pretty hard, if I'd have been the president of the United States on 9/11 and had been down there with the bullhorn, I think I probably would have taken a pretty maximalist approach to our response. So, I mean, I'm maybe not making excuses for Bush, but I find that less. It's interesting that that was enough to push me out of the party, and now I'm kind of like, well,
Well,
Lord, if all we had as a disagreement was that he wanted to go to war with the wrong country, like,
but what's funny is that isn't like the one thing that drove you away from the Republicans is one thing now the Republicans espouse that that was a mistake in Trump. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I also can't divorce from this conversation my dream that a third party isn't going to work because you see the flexing of the muscles of power on Capitol Hill, right? Like, I don't care if 99.79% of the population of the US desperately wanted a third party, never going to happen because the people who control the levers of things aren't going to risk losing that grip. But boy, it seems like such a good time for a third party, right? Certainly positionally. I guess maybe that's the difference. Like,
could you get rid
yeah,
of parties altogether? What if you made there's some elected offices that are nonpartisan. What if you made the presidency a nonpartisan elected official? What would be the impact of that? That could be a whole podcast right there, but that's a what would that mean?
well, I mean, who's the going in price is $1 billion to run a campaign.
Yeah.
So it sort of, if you did a nonpartisan thing, it sort of takes out a whole lot of people from
Yeah.
contention.
Well, you just wonder um, with social media and technology, could you get to a place where you don't declare a party? You just have a platform. And what would that then look like if Trump and Biden are running each other and they're not a Republican and a Democrat? Who are they?
Yeah.
And I don't know, that could almost be more perplexing for the candidate to some degree, because I would think it's a bit of an easy button to say, well, I'm a Democrat. No, I'm going to fight for all the Democrat stuff, because then you don't have to explain yourself in every position.
Right. Well, I would say that Mamdani, to some degree, I mean, technically he ran as a Democrat, but he made no bones about his very significantly more liberal stance than the Democratic Party. He was a Democrat in name only. In some
Well,
ways, I guess I'm saying he did what you're suggesting you might do.
well, that's part of the problem. The Communist Party doesn't have a whole lot of financial and political clout. would the Communist Party even get a money for an election? I guess
So I'm not a huge fan, but let's be accurate here. He's a socialist, not a communist. Those are not the same thing.
Well, I think a lot of people view that as a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Communist, you know, communist is, there's no private enterprise. The government owns everything. They're in complete control. Socialist is, you know, a bunch of
Rent
stuff
control.
is owned and run by the government, but other stuff is private. But I think the general feeling is that if somebody's a socialist, if they could be a communist, they would be. That it's a goal of somebody that goes down that path, that the ultimate control would be all with the government.
So I'm not going to guess about population because I I was pretty far off with Iran last week, but the United Kingdom is a socialist government, more or less. I mean,
That's a good example, maybe, of what I'm talking about. I feel like, and I guess this is my own view, and I don't know if this is supported by everybody else, but I think the view of a socialist government is, yeah, you're in Denmark. Like it's pretty free, but they're going to run healthcare and schools and stuff. But communist, it's not just a socioeconomic or an economic system, but it also speaks to more of a totalitarian mindset of full government control. And I don't, I think in reality, what a lot of people fear when they say communist, it's not a collectivism. It's not, what Lenin's ideal society. It's Lenin. It's like, like there's
yeah.
no communist leader that, oh, it's all going to be great for everybody. Yeah, that's in practice. But in reality, the communist leader is a totalitarian asshole that kills everybody.
Right. And I agree with that. I don't
But where
know.
I'm going with that, Ken, I guess where I'm going is when you see things like the UK, okay, UK, it's just socialist. But then you start looking at some of their practices. I was reading a stat. They arrested 15,000 people last year, and I'll have to fact check that. But I thought for sure it was 15,000 that they've arrested for posting on social media. Like they didn't like the
Mm,
post that somebody put on social media, and UK does not have freedom of speech is not a thing in the UK. So, and then, it's like you see some of these, and forgive me if I got that number wrong, but I think even if you did the research, there's a lot of people, like their laws around, you say something on social media, they can come pick you, the police can come pick you up. I mean, you can't do that here. You know what I mean? And so I think there's a fear that where is that, like it's a slippery slope once you go down that socialist path and you're not far from totalitarianism. Is it?
for what it's worth, they've arrested people on campus at Columbia University for what they said.
Well, they deported people for what they said.
Yeah. I I don't know. I guess he wants to cut the bus fares to zero. That is not quite the same thing as like starting up the gulag machine. I just it it just doesn't seem that outrageous to me. He's more liberal than I am. I tend to be more fiscally conservative on stuff, but like, oh, this guy's a communist. I mean, rent control's been a conversation in New York for a long time.
Yeah, it's 12,000 for social media
12,000.
posting in the UK arrest. Well, and I mean, honestly, how many people are actually paying their bus fare to begin with? I don't know. It's funny in Germany. I don't know if it's like this everywhere in Germany, but we were in Munich, and like it's all in the honor system to pay for the bus fare. I mean, that's the difference in cultures, right? In Germany, you say, well, it's on the honor system. Well, everybody pays. If you said New York City, it's on the honor system, how many people are paying the bus fare? You know,
Well, I wish we could get a third party. I wish we could get something that would destabilize a little bit. But it's been a long time since we've had meaningful change like that in this country.
yeah. And again, it's you alluded to it. There's just too much money and power at stake. I
Yeah.
mean, if you took away the party system, look at all these jerks that have all the money that can, who's going to shell out tens of millions of dollars for a candidate? There could be 50 people running against them.
Yeah. Well, I certainly think the parties have done neither side a whole lot of good.
Well, and again, I don't understand why in this day of technology, you couldn't get to where There's a government app that you can be, I mean, we can do sophisticated multi-factor authentication with anybody. Why couldn't we all vote on an app with multi-factor authentication? I mean, surely you could do that better than these funky voting machines that you go do. You know what I mean? Surely you could do that in a way that would be fair for everybody. Then have maybe you've got some automated system for somebody that can't do the multi-factor on their phone. But if you could do that and everybody is on an app, could you get to a place where you take out all of the party stuff and hey, you want to run, you got to duke out your ideas in some public forum. I don't know. I don't know if that's possible.
I like the idea. I think that in theory it would work great. But I'd point out that 8 years ago, the election got so politicized by choice by the loser of that election and the party that didn't sanction that we've undercut faith in the election so much that, I mean, who's going to bring that proposal forward? And half the country's going to say it's a scam.
Yeah. Well, no, I would submit to you that fear of the elections being broken predate Trump for sure. I mean, the day of the hanging Chad is an example. I mean, there's been I think a lot of, Trump won the first time and Hillary Clinton was saying he was illegitimate and wasn't truly elected. I mean, I feel like both sides use that depending on the situation.
Yeah, interesting that it got so much better between 2020 and 2024.
No, I think it just continues to get worse. I think it will continue to get. I mean,
well, no, but I mean, Trump's like, no, it was they said I lost, so it was clearly, it was clearly made up, and it was clearly a scam. But when I won, like, oh no, it was planned. Like, that's what I'm talking about. I'm hating Trump. I'm doing that right now. But like, it just So it's harder to get to some sort of a bipartisan solution than it's ever been.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's back to that whole line of, we have a dysfunctional government. Good. I'm glad. Well, and that was the other thing we talked about with Mom and our aunt. I mean, it's kind of that conversation about the vaccines. I mean, every stinking aspect of our life is politicized. We're talking about getting to a place where we have a nonpartisan running for president. Well, the supersonic train is headed in the opposite direction. It's going to where everything, I mean, bourbon and rum, I guarantee you, if you dug into the depths of X conversations, there's people that are hating on bourbon and rum for various reasons from both sides, both parties. I'm sure there's some environmental harm that it's doing or, exploiting people. I mean, there's some crap you could find that somebody doesn't like somebody else about what they drink based on politics.
Yeah. Well, and likewise, talk about offices. I bet there's 100,000 spent on some municipalities running for dog catcher.
Yeah. Oh, I knew a guy running for the Texas to be a state representative. And I think and this was 10 years ago, I think he told me the going rate to run for state house representative in Texas is like 50 grand. Like, what are you getting out of that? I mean, honestly, you think about the amount of money getting spent across all these elections. I mean, the whole thing is a big scam. It's a hoax, Kent.
Yeah, I think they pay like $25 a day while they're in session for the legislature in Iowa. You got to be in there a long time to recoup your 50 grand.
Okay, all right, how about this, Kent? What if our political system, let's scrap the whole thing and make it like jury duty and people get randomly selected for leadership posts? How much worse would it be?
It wouldn't be worse. I mean, it would be horrible. I mean, it would be really bad. You would have terrible ideas. It would not be worth what we've
You imagine
And think
somebody,
about that. I mean, I don't know. I'm a little judicious about what I talk about, but I will talk about politics with people that I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I'll throw stuff out there just to kind of see where we're at, or, in a good, lighthearted way. Maybe people are just making nice to me, but I've never heard just a random stranger saying things about me and people who think about things the way that I do. Like, if you run the reel of what you hear from people, the acrimony, the ad hominem attacks, that, like, people don't do that. Like, normal people
right,
don't do that.
right.
The people that do that, that are the ones that have spent $1 million to win the seat, and they're desperate to, like, if everybody had to go, I think you'd have to drop it to less than 2 years, but it could be like a 6 month deal. Like,
Yeah.
I drew the number. I got to go to Washington. People would gripe about it. They would be like, oh, great. I got picked for the House of Representatives.
Well, you say, it wouldn't be off and it wouldn't be any worse. And I would submit to you, yeah, I think it would work because it's all because of the swamp. It's the same, and you call whatever you want to call it, the infrastructure, the swamp, pick the characterization. But like if they just pulled in John Smith and all of a sudden President John Smith is in charge from Podunk, Eastern Kentucky, there's a people, all right, sir, right this way, Mr. Smith. You're going to come here. This is your office. Pick from this furniture, which you want the Resolute desk. Okay, here you go. And like there's a system in place. They can just follow by the numbers.
Well, I
It's not like
heard,
they got to go invent it all themselves.
well, I heard even, I don't know how I got on it, like a description of how the nuclear football works. And, you know, perish the thought when the day comes, they crack that thing open. They've already got it worked out. There's like, do you want the option A, B, or C? There's no discussion about what are we going to do and where's the,
Yeah,
like, well, because it has to make a decision really quick. So you don't think that the military could give you three options? I mean, I know how to do this in a business meeting, for God's sakes, right?
right. I mean, there's teams in the military that are wargaming every possible option, and they've got a list of alternatives. Anything happens in the world, some general shows up in the situation room, and he's got three options that they've talked about for the last 20 years. I mean, it's not like
Right. But what
they're
I'm
going to
saying
stump
is
somebody.
that, but even the selection of the three options, like, they're in control of it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
No president is making any kind of real rational decision because you don't even really have three equal options in front of you. Again, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
right.
When you give somebody three options, you give them the two that you don't want them to pick. You make so painful. Like, well, one is we kill everybody on the face of the earth, and the other is that we ask the Russians to stop. But the third alternative is this, 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 and this. You're going to get number three.
Well, and then day one, they're going to be like, okay, this is why you can't release the Epstein files. This is why you can't release the JFK files, and this is why you can't release the UFO files.
Yeah.
And and the guy John Smith from Eastern Kentucky is going to be like, shit. Yeah, I guess you're right. Okay, approved.
Yeah.
Hey,
Well,
on
and
that note, and I won't go down the Epstein path, but we'll go down the JFK path. We, our mom and our aunt are huge JFK buffs. They've been to Dallas multiple times. We've done every possible JFK thing. I mean, we've been to the Sixth Floor Museum. We've been to Oswald's grave. They've been to his apartment. I mean,
did you
but
rent a convertible and drive Dealey Plaza with them in it?
that's a good idea. We didn't do that yet. We did go to the Texas Theater where Oswald was caught this week. We couldn't get in. But one of the places we went, which was I'd never heard about. Have you ever heard of Ruth Paine, Kent?
No.
We went to the Ruth Paine home, which is now a museum. Ruth Paine and her husband had befriended Marina Oswald and her kids, I guess, and Lee, and somehow they'd become friends and helped them during a period of time. And Marina wound up living with them, and Oswald spent the night at the house the day before Kennedy was shot, and he stored the rifle in her garage. And so we went to the house. The city of Irving bought the house back in the early 2000s, and then they've pretty cool that they renovated it with Ruth Payne helped them, and they got it to look exactly alike. I mean, they matched everything. It's all like inside, it's all replica of everything, and they've got some exhibits. They've got a little bit. Some of the furniture is from Ruth Payne, so it's a wide variety of stuff. But they they give a tour and they talk through the history. But we were talking about this and this Payne house and everything, and driving to the theater and talking about all these details. What would it be that would be so bad? Well, if the CIA killed Kennedy, which a lot of people think they did, I don't think anybody would be shocked. Everybody would be like, okay, I can. I mean, it's objectionable and it's bad, but what if Lyndon Johnson did it? What if Lyndon Johnson was in on it? If a president, and back to our whole discussion about feelings about presidents, if a president actually flipped and got him assassinated, I think that is a fact everybody would agree never to release. Because then it would,
Yes.
if you're the president, because if the president's making the decision, and then you would know that everybody, the level of confidence that would be eroded in the presidency itself would be so great, it could be catastrophic.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know why I can't go with that. I mean, I think you're right. I think it makes sense. But again, could you keep a secret? If there was like black and white proof, post-it note, signed Lyndon Johnson, get him while he's in Dallas,
Right.
I promise a pardon for you. You're going to be fine. Just handle this for me. Somebody, after all that's going on, that nobody mentions, hey, you ought to check the post-it notes. you know,
Yeah.
I, I just, man, I just don't know that people could keep that secret.
Yeah, that does make it possible.
But I'm Epsteining now. The same thing. You know that somebody knows what's there. I thought so. I've mentioned before Tara Palmieri. She was with remember the victims had that kind of like a day on Capitol Hill a couple months ago. And one of the women said something like, well, maybe we ought to compile our own list. If they're not going to release it, we ought to put out our own list of who we dealt with. She was the only one that said that. And it was pointed out afterwards that the others looked at her when she said that, like, oh my gosh, shut up. I mean, for legitimate fear for their lives, if people thought you were a threat to do that.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess to tie it back to our original subject about the generational piece, JFK assassination is like the Epstein. I don't. That may be a stretch to compare the two of them. Although I'm researching this Ruth Payne stuff on YouTube, and something came up with Ruth Payne and the Epstein file. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, how do they link those two together? But I don't know. It certainly not like. Do you remember where you were when you found out about Jeffrey Epstein? I mean, there's nothing like that. But I think I put that conspiracy piece in a similar place where, like, that has obsessed people of that generation.
Yeah.
For the last 60 years. It's like they'll take that conspiracy to their grave. And I'm hopeful that the Epstein thing doesn't last that long. Hopefully somebody spills their beans and the thing's over with. But I tend to think it probably will also be something that people will obsess about till their graves.
Well, and at this point, with all of the BS that's gone with it, I don't know. I mean, I'd feel a whole lot better out of it if somebody would send out something that listed what we all know was going on. I have somewhat more confidence in that case. But I got to admit, I'm not sure that, if you emailed me the Excel file right now and it had his fingerprints on it, I'm not sure they've had some time to scrub the Excel files at this point.
Yeah, right.
The hiding's gone on long enough. I don't know that anybody's ever going to fully accept it. when people are willing to go to this level to obfuscate, would you ever trust what they told you?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's back to our whole conversation about like how do you determine what truth is? Everything's if everything's a hoax and everything's fake news, well, what the hell is true? Who do you count on to tell you what's true? And to your
Mm-hmm.
point, no matter what they tell us about JFK or like any of these, nobody's going to believe it because it's all tainted.
Yeah. Yeah.
I tried to comfort mom when dad died at some point early on. I was like, well, mom, at least he knows right now who killed JFK, who killed John Bonet. I don't know if Epstein had made the conversation point at that, but I mean, those are some of the first things I'm going to want to know. That the Ramsey thing is another one that is, it's not on the level of those two, but well, okay. But do you think? Let's think about the generational differences. Are folks of our moms and aunts age group, are they more? I think they're less likely to believe in conspiracies than we are. Because, I mean, there's a lot of people that were okay with the Warren. If the Warren
Yeah.
Commission happened today, everybody would think it was nonsense.
Well, I haven't looked into it at all, but I'm sure that there are conspiracies about Charlie Kirk, right? I
Well,
have no idea.
oh, well, you haven't seen it. Well, the big one is that the wife having something to do with it. So.
If I was thinking up nonsense to throw at you for this podcast, I wouldn't go to that.
And I hope our listener base knows that we explore a lot of topics, and I don't want them to think we're extreme whack jobs, and I hope people listen to this. Like I was thinking about last week, we talked about the whole thing about anti-Semitism and what qualifies for anti-Semitism and what doesn't, and sometimes I fear like even just bringing up some of these subjects, some percentage might listen to it and be like, "Oh, you guys are bad for talking about this stuff." But hopefully people that listen to us know that, we explore all sides of this stuff, even if it sounds wacko. So before I say something that could sound wacko, I like to at least preface it that, we're not like Kent and I are sitting here showing the Q symbols to each other or something. I think we're pretty open about, exploring things, but the, some of the conspiracy around the Charlie Kirk thing is, I don't know if you've seen this wife. I mean, some of her behavior is a little bit odd. Some of how she's interacted with people, and there's a level of, some folks think she's a little phony acting, and like maybe she's you hate to say something that would, no, people grieve. Like it may be all on the up and up, and people grieve and are just different when they grieve, but you do see some of these things that are a little almost odd or off-putting. I don't want to be insensitive. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to upset somebody needlessly. And, some of this stuff you talk about, I feel like we can talk about anything. You're not going to worry about hurting my feelings. I'm not going to worry about hurting your feelings. I think we have that relationship. But if somebody else is listening to it and we're laughing about something somebody might find incredibly hurtful, I don't want that. But I don't think people necessarily think that, but
No, I agree. I think it's we're late in the game to be switching up the topics here, but we talked a little bit last week about the role that political correctness or kind of cultural unity within parties, the orthodoxy that like you all got to go along with it. I think that that's toxic, honestly, for groups of both sides, that there's an orthodoxy that you got to buy into. And clearly, I mean, I think there's no way around it, especially Trump's second election, but the first to a degree, it is absolute that there was in part a reaction to cancel culture, right? We've admitted
yeah,
that, and I think that that's fair. But we ought to dial back cancel culture, but we also ought to dial back just being an ass for being an ass sake. And in some ways, if people would be more, maybe it's too much to ask, but civility kind of actually has when you inflame for the sake of inflammation, it's bad, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that in general terms. I think the frustration is, though, there have been, and I think about this from the right, there have been Republican leaders that have played that civility approach, and then there's ridicule that comes with that. And there's a feeling of, you know, you just gotta, you gotta take that as criticism. I think what inspired a lot of people with Trump is he was somebody who's willing to fight back to it. And somebody criticizes you, you go 100% the other way. Now, that's flies in the face of conventions, but I think they were sick of the vitriol that was often experienced on the other side, even when somebody was civil. And so the thought is, okay, if you're going to get shouted down, even being civil, then screw it, I'm going to go all in the other way. And I think that's what people liked. But then it becomes like both sides are shouting at each other. And to your point, is that good? I don't know that it is.
Well, I will say that I think one of the things that's really toxic that probably doesn't get the label of uncivil nearly as much as it should. I think that belittling, mocking, making fun of, and laughing at people's issues is, like, look, I don't have everybody's issues, and I don't pretend, I want to be sensitive to, I want to be what you just described, right? Like be like not a jerk to people about things. And I know that there's stuff that I don't understand very well, but I don't want to just, I don't want to make light of people. I don't think I mean, after I've spent the whole, an hour making light of the assassination of a president or whatever, but I just, why we got to be obnoxious to each other? I don't understand
Yeah, right.
It looks small to me when someone's doing that. It looks small. I know what you mean about Trump and the fight back, but it looks small to me. It looks like it looks like people realize that the culture is changing out from underneath them and they don't like it. So they're going to really stick it to the libs. And I just like, gosh, get over yourself.
Well, but I don't know. I do argue with the sense that, the place was super civil before Trump got involved. I don't think it was. I mean, I think a lot of people said a lot of ugly things about whoever was running.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
not
the difference is
hanging
now
this
is the guy at the
particular.
top's jumped in the mix.
Yeah, I'm not particularly hanging this on Trump.
Yeah.
I think Trump's in part of an outgrowth of a trend in that direction, but no, it's not. That's not his fault by any means.
But I don't know. I think it's funny what people compare it to because, I think with Trump, a lot of people see him as brash and uncouth, and then they're like, well, why doesn't he have somebody more like a reserved statesman like George W. Bush? But when George W. Bush opened his mouth, everyone's like, well, he's an idiot, and then we all talk about how great Reagan sounded. But at the time, Reagan was talking, well, he's a dumb actor and he doesn't know anything, so it's like there is a seeming level of relativism. I think with Trump, it's just you get this, I don't care. I'm just gonna fly in the face of all the conventions, and I don't think people know how to handle it.
Hey, thanks for joining us on this episode of Bourbon and Rum Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Remember to subscribe on your favorite platform and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us keep the good spirits flowing.
And we invite you to join this conversation. Follow us on our Facebook page. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you want to hear.
And until next time, cheers.